We'll have a chat to Bryan in a tick. And your views, how has it been? What sort of access do you get to your GP? Do you still have a local GP? How are the fees? You tell me your story. But I just noticed this after being through my health little crisis in the last week. And heading into the hospital, I realised, man, there's a lot of Kiwis here. And half of them don't probably need to be there. They should be at the primary care, which is the GP, and the GP should be properly funded so the GP can see the people. Sort of, this used to happen in the 80s when I was around as a young fella. Anyway, Bryan Betty, Chair of General Practice New Zealand, does a wonderful job, works out of Cannons Creek, Wellington, which is, a pretty tough sort of spot. There's all sorts of issues, and Bryan deals with them daily, and he joins us now. Bryan, g'day, welcome to the program, nice to see you.
Oh, nice to be here, Duncan.
I know you've done many of these interviews and many with Leah and over the last year, and I've been back and listened to a lot of them because just to remind myself where we are at. Are we any better off than the last time we were in crisis?
Look, it's a really difficult question, Duncan, because to rectify the problems that had grown over a number of years, and that's the situation we're in general practice, takes time. Now, to be fair to the government, they've done one of the biggest cash injections into general practice this year, which is good to rectify some of the underfunding that's occurred, which is nice. They've got some plans in place to increase access to overseas graduates into New Zealand, so to make it easier for them to come to New Zealand, and put in place programs for those medical trained doctors within New Zealand who don't come from accredited countries to upskill to go into our system. So there's three things that have sort of happened. However, these things take time.
Yeah.
So to see a improvement isn't overnight. It's not next year. It's probably not next year after. We're looking at it. We need a plan, or we need thinking over the next 5 years. That's what's really required here. So it's a start. But in a lot of areas we won't see a marked change at this point.
Shivers. I mean, the negligence within what you say there, when I say negligence, I'm not individually targeting any government or any one particular person or whatever. I'm just saying that the fact it takes so long, and we know it takes so long because everything, building a house never takes, a night. So, but the fact that it could take 2 or 3 years for that money and for those plans to start to rectify, it just seems so far off, Bryan.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think that's a fair comment, Duncan. But again, if it takes 15 years to get to the spot, to sort of start to have recovery or try to have recovery does take time. And we have an ageing population. We have a population that's growing. There's more complexity in the community. Our hospitals are under pressure. They tend to fall back onto general practice. So there's absolutely increased workload. So not only do we have to make up the deficit in terms of our workforce, we need to actually then grow the workforce to take into account the growing population, the growing complexity, people living older, which leads to more complex medical problems requiring medical care. So those things have to be taken into account as well. This has always been a difficult situation over the last few years. It still is. But there was some positive signs this year in terms of what the government did. But again, I wouldn't lay this at the feet of any one government at all. I think this has been a long-term issue that has really sort of come to this tipping point.
Yeah, and I've been around long enough now too to realise that. I mean, I think it's futile to say, the National War Labour. I mean, it's successive administrations. They roll this stuff over, and unless you make a genuine, massive change to something, like you saw with the cancer drugs. And the funding there, which has made a difference, and like you say with GP funding this year, then to roll over just the usual funding with the population increase, we've just fall further behind, which is what's happened with GPs. I reckon there's GPs aren't even available anymore. And in New Lynn, White Cross, I had a bit of an incident recently. The New Lynn White Cross doesn't exist now. There are hundreds of people going through there every day.
Yeah, look, I mean, there's a number of practices that are under significant pressure. There's a lot of practices that have what we call closed books because they're just at capacity, and that's a pure capacity problem, that your capacity isn't matching demand. And, Yeah, those are the type of problems you start to run into. Now, that they vary around the country, and certainly certain areas are very badly hit with this, especially rural areas and some high needs areas. But yeah, what's interesting about the situation at the moment, we're seeing that some of these capacity issues within the main urban areas, which we traditionally didn't see. So yeah, that's what you're running into, Duncan. And yeah, that's bad because if that doesn't exist and you can't get access to that primary care, you can't get access to your GP, you can't get access to general practice, you end up in a hospital emergency room. And yeah, that's really bad. In fact, I've just been to the UK and the situation there is even worse. And their EDs are just overflowing. People can't access general practice at all because it's sort of been run down to this point.
Yeah.
And we're not quite there yet, but gee, it was a bit of a vision to where we could get to, and we need to make sure that doesn't happen.
When did we start to take our eye off the ball of general practice and primary care? Because primary care, when I was always told, growing up and also as a young journalist and then growing up and being in Parliament for 20 years and, interviewing all these ministers and everything, that the primary care services in New Zealand were crucial that we funded them properly because that's where you did all the hard work and avoided those hospital admissions, which are so expensive.
That's 100% right. That's correct. I mean, what you've just said is the absolute core issue here, that if you have access to quality, comprehensive, continuous primary care and general practice, you take demand off hospitals essentially, and people have better health outcomes. So that's absolutely true. When do we take our eye off the ball? That's really hard to pinpoint. But one of the comments I would make is we tend to have quite a view or a lens on hospitals and the problems within hospitals, and we see that all the time in the media and what actually goes on. For a long time, I think the problems in general practice and primary care just floated under the surface because they're not a vote winner, for want of a better word. And I actually think that's what's happened, that often, yeah, the people talk about have been number one priority. But what you see happening is things get diverted into the hospital system because they're under such acute stress as well. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg type situation that exacerbates over time. And I think this issue, we were trying to raise the issue for a long time, but it's in many ways it creeps under the surface until it's become this problem it has become.
Yeah, it's like the men's health warning. You put it off for 10 years and suddenly it bites you in the backside. It's a bit like the system itself. Yeah,
it's that type of situation. Yeah, exactly.
But I just wonder though, with with the new health minister Simeon Bryan, whenever I hear him, he actually sounds good. Whenever I hear his sound bites, because that's sometimes all you can listen to half the time, it sounds like that he's quite laser focused in making sure the money gets to the front line of health. Am I wrong or am I right?
Look, I think he's been very, very consistent with what he's said over that. And as I said, this year's budget was the biggest funding uplift for general practice we've seen in a long time. And I think that in itself, there are some fishhooks in there, but I mean, that gives an indication that there is perhaps a focus coming back onto general practice and the problems that are there and a need to rectify those problems. There's a long way to go. I mean, the actual funding formula itself for general practice is very flawed, I believe. It's out of date. It was put in place 20 years ago. It absolutely needs a revamp. And again, if the government is serious and Health New Zealand is serious, that revamp will occur, and it should occur in the next year or two, because we've been saying for a long time the funding formula has to be fixed because it doesn't take into account things like complexity, the number of times a patient visits, a whole raft of things which need to be adjusted. So, yeah, there are some fundamental structural problems that need to be fixed. The uplift this year was welcome, was generally welcome. There were some criticisms of it, but on the whole it was positive. But we have to fix the underlying funding issue, and that has to be the absolute challenge here.
How many GPs do we train a year?
Okay, so to maintain our levels and to take into account increasing population and complexity and demand, we should be training 300 a year. On average, it's sitting probably around the low 200s or 200. So there is a deficit in the number we are training. That's been one of the big problems we've had over a number of years, which is why we've got the problems. We're very, very dependent on overseas trained doctors. 40 to 50% of our doctors are trained overseas. So we're absolutely reliant on overseas trained doctors coming in to support our health system. But yeah, we aren't close to the 300 a year that we should be training at this point.
I mean, how hard is it to train another 100 GPs? I mean, we're not that much of a deadbeat country that we can't extend ourselves to 300, are we?